All attendees are in listen only.
Okay, we're going to call the Independent Redistricting Commission to order. I'll do a roll call. Honorable Elizabeth Allen White.
Here.
Honorable Abraham Khan.
Present.
Honorable Chair Melinda A. Johnson.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we'll have public comment. This is for items that are not on the agenda. If anybody raises their hand within the app and would like to speak on items not on the agenda, please do so now.
If I might interject, Your Honor, this would be a great opportunity for the first of two chances for Judge Ochoa and Dr. Ebenstein to introduce themselves before I give the substantive presentation.
That would be very nice. I know Judge Ochoa, but I expect our other panelists don't, and I don't know Dr. Ebenstein, so.
I think we may have evolved that during our tenure on the bench. The commission folks who are all former bench officers, I think. I'm Frank Ochoa. I represented the District Elections Committee in the after effects of the district elections lawsuit when we got into changes in the charter and modification in the agreement to meet the current circumstances.
Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I assisted in drafting a lot of the language that was put into the charter amendments and got the commission folks where you are in terms of drafting or creating districts according to the census data as it would be coming out. And that's the issue that we're here to talk about is census data and how to get the districts in compliance with that data. And Lenny Ebenstein is part of a statewide elections program, and he worked with us throughout the entirety of that process also. I'll let Lanny introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Judge. My name's Lanny Ebenstein, and I'm the president of the California Center for Public Policy and also a member of the Santa Barbara District Elections Committee. And I'm a follower of Judge Ochoa, so it's something that his work really made the difference in the subsequent charter amendments that were put together. I was also a great admirer of Mr. Cologne's role in that process too. Both on behalf of the California Center for Public Policy and the Santa Barbara District Elections Committee, we're of course very interested in this continuing process and welcome the opportunity to participate in the meeting this evening. And at some point, I'll probably have some comment on the proposals that are before you. If that concludes public comment, Your Honor, we're ready to go to our primary agenda item.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Nicole, this is where I need help. Okay, great. So our agenda item today is to talk about the possible extension of the November 1, 2021 deadline that was written into the city charter when we worked on the amendments that Judge Ochoa and Dr. Ebenstein mentioned. The action you took last month was important in two ways. Primarily, it included your finding that it's presently impossible to meet the November 1, 2021 deadline. That was important to us because it provided a rational, factual justification for going to the next step, which is asking my office, with the assistance of Marguerite Leone from the Nielsen Merksmer firm, to examine what your legal options might be. So we're back this month with a report. We've provided the written report. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at that. That's principally the work of Ms. Leone, but I am happy to have worked on it and endorse it. So if we can go on to the next slide. So our recommendation for, thank you. Our recommendation for today is that you recommend to the City Council that they authorize and direct our office to file a petition for writ of mandate to extend the November 2021 deadline for about 7 months. And we'll talk about that long in a little bit. Next slide, please. So we are fortunate to have a framework laid out for us on how to approach this problem. And I want to say, as a small aside, you know, with the work we all do, we often deal with intense factual problems that affect people in very direct ways. This project has that character, but it also has a really kind of wonderful intellectual component that makes me happy. I get to learn every day. So I wanted to share that joy at 5:20 p.m. after a council meeting that ended at 9:30 last night. Anyway, like your commission, the court essentially found that the pandemic-driven delays in the federal census made it impossible for the state to meet the constitutional deadlines that it was presented with. That's the less remarkable part of the case. Next slide, please. They, of course, reached that conclusion for a number of reasons, and that's the interesting part. The court confronted that Justice Kruger, writing for a unanimous court, confronted the question of what powers it had to reform legislation. In other words, when does separation of powers preclude the court, not symbolically, not effectively, but actually substituting its judgment for what is in the written law? So I appreciated Justice Kruger approaching that question with great trepidation. And as you know, I'm a local government wonk, and separation of powers is very important. So I appreciated the analysis. So how does the analysis go? When can the court reform legislation? When would it be appropriate to ask a Santa Barbara Superior Court to reform legislation? The court essentially set up a standard that they said, if we can conclude with confidence that what we're doing is necessary to effect the legislative intent, we will reform the statute. And they came up with that to work past prior precedent that had refused to fix broken initiatives. So it was a very significant step for the court to recognize that, albeit in a fairly obvious factual setting where there's really no alternative. So long story short, the lack of any real alternative gave the court the power to substitute its judgment for the words written in the legislation in order to effectuate the clear intent of the legislation. Next slide, please. So Judge Ochoa, I tried to provide sufficient deference to our conversation last week, indicating your support for the process and not committing any support for an outcome. I thought that it would be appropriate for you to discuss that after you hear the presentation. But if you'd like to address it now, that's appropriate as well.
Well, thank you, Ariel. I did review the report, and of the options available to address the problem, I think that the one that you're pointing to makes the most sense. And, you know, of course, and I'm sure Lanny would be concerned about this, Mr. Evenstein, we don't have the underlying background information regarding whether or not there is sufficient information from the census to be able to proceed in a more expeditious fashion. The committee has found that that is the case, and that there may be a public record that supports that. But as long as that is the case, and I trust that it is based on the indication from the committee, then it seems like the route that you've set forth is the most meaningful and the most expeditious way to deal with the problem. I would go ahead and hand it off to Mr. Evenstein and see if he has any additional comments regarding the matter.
Sure, Judge Cho, thank you for your comments. You know, two quick comments on it are, one, you know, the time frame is awfully short because the city council race filing period, I believe, starts at the end of July and runs until early August, or approximately that time frame. And you would have to have new districts drawn, you know, in literally 8 weeks from starting from scratch from right now. And that does seem pretty difficult given the importance. And I think that we're committed to meaningful citizen participation in this drawing process. And even if the information were available, to get that information out to people and have it reviewed by the community is something that I think would be difficult. But we did want to ask just one more time in terms of, do you think there is any way that it would be possible to try to do something by the end of July, or is that technically it just seems to be infeasible? That was one question in terms of that seems to be the primary finding. Then secondly, by chance, is there any other city in the state that's in the same position in terms of very few cities remain with district elections on odd numbered years? And this, in fact, is the last year for the city of Santa Barbara. Are you aware of any other cities in the state, and what have they chosen to do? And then the third factor goes then to the timing of when the commission would have its meetings, is that because of the transition in the city council races, that the first election that this would pertain to wouldn't be until November of 2024, which is a good period of time from now. And so for that reason as well, it would seem that the city should do extra reaching out to people, because I think there was a certain momentum that was created with districts in the 2021, and it was going to be the last one, and it would be with the new lines and so forth. And obviously that can't be done now. Some of that enthusiasm, I think, is diminished. And I think the city should really work hard to let people know that although apparently it's not going to be until 2024 that there are the new lines, that people should get involved, and you should do lots of outreach and that sort of thing.
Well, there's a lot there to unpack, and I'd like to address it in the Q&A part. But let me say this first. You reminded me of a very, very important part of the legislature versus Padilla case that I neglected, and I'm sorry I neglected it. In finding the power to reform this statute, the court looked at legislative intent, and that then raises the question, what was the legislative intent of the deadline in state law. Well, the court concluded that the purpose of that deadline was to create time for public participation. So not extending it would be a perverse result in light of the intent of the legislation. So the public participation components represented both by the presence of Judge Ochoa and Dr. Ebenstein is a good reminder. Now, I'll address in the Q&A the specifics of how we're proposing to get there. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the commission also asked us how to do this. And again, I said that Padilla gave us a nice roadmap. It would be a petition for writ of mandate. The venue under the Banyala settlement agreement is here in Santa Barbara Superior Court. We'll talk about options there in a second. Here, it seems pretty clear that the simplest way to set this up is City Council sues City Clerk Paul Casey and seeks reformation of the charter provision in that petition. Next slide, please. So I mentioned venue is here. It's conceivable to seek original jurisdiction in the appellate court, Supreme Court. I don't imagine that's warranted in this instance. As we just heard, we don't have the urgency of an election in 2022. We're not slated after this year to have a general municipal election until 2024. So I think it makes perfect sense to respect the settlement agreement and bring the action here in Santa Barbara. Next slide, please. Okay, we're back to our recommendation. And if you would like, Your Honor, I can address the questions that were raised now or take the commission's questions first.
I'm happy to go with the ones that have already been presented unless someone on the commission wants to speak up right now.
Okay.
We're used to listening and waiting.
I'm sorry?
We're used to listening and waiting, so.
Thank you. In terms of other cities, there are probably not others that are directly comparable because we respected SB 415 that compelled all cities, including chartered cities, to move to even year elections with a bit of a wink and a nod. I had concluded that that legislation would not survive municipal affairs challenge under our city charter, meaning the municipal affairs doctrine clearly includes elections. And if a fundamental right, such as the right to vote, is not involved, then the city charter's date would prevail. I couldn't find any immediate voting right impaired by an even year election. There's nothing inherently preventive about an even year election. The city council wanted to move to even year elections. So they chose to do it, but on a schedule that didn't match the rest of the state. The rest of the state was compelled by SB 415 to implement even year elections by 2020. The council's implementation plan extends it out to 2024 effectively. And that was done in order to avoid shortening any terms. So all of the term changes were an extension. And this fall, will be electing a set of council members with 5-year terms. So that's why I don't think there are really other comparable cities that fit our exact model. In terms of timing of the meetings, Mr. Aguilar, who was trying to help us with the technical stuff, is not the technical guy. He is our civic engagement specialist from community development. He is here to represent the resources the council's allocated to, along with the commission's time, to conduct a robust public engagement process. And that means conducting hearings in the community, conducting hearings nights and weekends. That means having a web presence that includes the ability for the public to submit electoral maps of their own design. So the question is when, and you asked initially whether there were any opportunities for early data release. The answer is yes. We understand from Doug Johnson at National Demographics, who we worked with in the initial case, that they can do some quick read fairly quickly after they get the census data at the end of the summer. So it's conceivable that we'll have some preliminary information that, and of course we would release whatever we have. There's no reason for secrecy on it. But realistically, we are into November conducting hearings, and in all candor, you go back and forth in public service between avoiding the summer season for holidays and vacations and avoiding the winter season for holidays and vacations. And on balance, I think the fall is a pretty good time to do this. People's antennae are up because of political goings on, like our election. So I suspect if we sequence this beginning in October and November, we're going to get intense public and political interest, which is exactly what we want. Thank you, Your Honor.
And now, anyone on the commission have any questions that you would like to ask about the recommendation, the process, anything?
I have no questions. My only concern, and probably this should be directed to Judge Ochoa, if we do go in on a writ of mandate with the petitioner either being the city clerk or the city council, what's the timing and what sort of notice would have to be given?
Did we just lose Mr. Colon?
That was self-inflicted. Your Honor, if I might take that, I think that's probably best directed to me.
All right.
I think so. Yeah.
Legislature versus Padilla was set as an emergency petition. So the court took the unusual step of granting the peremptory writ initially. We all in local government law fantasize about that happening in our cases, but it doesn't. Given our schedule, I think that we would give regular notice here and probably look to get this. I have to get authorization from the city council. That would happen in June, so we would be filing in July. And we could seek an alternative writ, and I suspect if Judge Ochoa wanted to have a stipulation that could facilitate doing this, but I'm not really keen on trying to do it ex parte, so I don't really think I want to try for an alternative writ. I think we'll just notice a hearing on the motion initially.
Thank you.
So if it were heard in July, then you expect that they would rule quite quickly and we would know? No under submission for 90 days or anything like that?
I think, I'm hoping that the Superior Court treats you as I do, as effectively special masters here. You're special masters appointed by the voters to do this job. So I think with the strength of your finding and recommendation and the strength of Judge Ochoa's participation will get a fair result promptly.
Judge Khan, anything you want to ask?
No. I mean, is there anything extra that needs to be done considering the willingness to participate by the plaintiffs to the language of the settlement agreement or to the stipulated judgment?
Yes, we do need to pursue amendment of the settlement agreement and stipulated judgment. And we had included that in the recommendation last month, but it would be fair game to add it tonight, and I would document that in a minute.
This is just the tiniest bit off point, but are you then suggesting that we would start having the first public meeting in the late fall of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm also, when we get to the next item on the agenda, I want to make a process suggestion. So if the commission wants to offer a motion and take action, that would be appropriate.
To amend the recommendation to,
Initially to amend as described by Judge Khan, and then to make the recommendation.
is there such a motion?
Well, I don't know that I have the language right, but I would recommend then, consistent with the prior recommendations that have been made by this commission in its first meeting, that in addition to authorizing the city attorney to pursue whatever action was necessary in order to extend the deadline that was contained in Charter Section 1301, that the city attorney also be authorized to conduct whatever further negotiations are needed to appropriately amend any existing settlement agreement and stipulated judgment.
I think you did that off the top of your head quite impressively, actually. I think it contained everything. Do you not, Mr. Cologne?
Yeah, I just may hope that they clicked record when they started.
Well, I was typing like mad, so we'll see. Second?
I second it.
Okay. All in favor? I vote aye.
Aye.
All right. So the recommendation is moved and seconded and voted to be amended. And then is there anything else that we should do before voting on the recommendation as amended, Mr. Cologne?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. This is a recommendation. I don't think we need a motion in this respect. All those in favor of the recommendation as amended? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. I would like to mention to Judge Ochoa and Dr. Evenstein that the members of the commission, I think during our interviews and in other meetings we've had, are pretty much committed to at least one of us being at any public meeting that's held with this respect. So evenings and weekends are good for us. So someone will be there so the participants know who are sitting on this.
Very much appreciate that.
Okay. On discussion of future agendas, I'd like to, oh, excuse me, Mark.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, City Attorney Klon. We just to alert you, we did skip over approval of the minutes of the last meeting before.
I noticed that was the thing here. Okay.
So, and I apologize. The minutes were online, but we did not send the commissioners the actual document. I have just momentarily, a few moments ago, sent them to you. It's a PDF. I don't know if you want to wait until the next meeting to review, or if you want to take a 5-minute recess just to review. Mr. Klon would probably be the best to advise you.
Well,
Mr. Aguilar. Oh, go ahead, Your Honor.
I was just going to ask, I read them from the materials that you have online. I read them. I don't know if the other two members had a chance to read them. Judge Allen?
Hadn't. No.
Mr. Khan did not. Okay. So
I'm looking at it right now. It was just sent to me in PDF, so I'm looking at it right now.
maybe we could take it up at the end of the meeting, go through the rest of the things we need to do. I hate to continue things. All judges hate to continue things. If we can do it today, let's do it today. So you can move ahead with the rest of the agenda and we'll take it up at the end.
Thank you. Let me first correct my comments. I got a note here that Chula Vista contacted us with a charter mandated deadline problem, and Rancho Cucamonga may also have a similar issue. With that correction, on discussion of future agendas, I mentioned Mr. Aguilar's role. I also want to mention Ms. Sosa Acosta's role, and I want to encourage the commission to think about an appropriate deadline to set for us to come back with a full-scale civic engagement plan that we can use to make sure we have the appropriate funding and to make sure things actually happen. While I like the innovative aspect of the start of this meeting, I don't want that to be the way our public hearings go when we're out in the community. So I think a deadline would be good. I think September 1 would be a good deadline for us to be back to you with a full-blown engagement plan. Perhaps with a status report between now and then. So up to you, but we're at your service during the period while we're waiting for the data.
Are we expecting that we'll be having these kinds of meetings approximately monthly, or after this one, not necessarily monthly?
I think it's a good idea to convene and keep the momentum going. I want to encourage people to continue participating. So even if it's a check-in, I think it's worth the time.
Okay. Any thoughts from the commissioners on when the plan that Mr. Colon is proposing should be presented?
Well, can we get a little bit more detail? Because with regard to the civic engagement plan, I guess we're going to have to consult whatever applicable laws there are that require the participation that such a plan would require. And is that going to involve staff support that properly guides the commission with regard to this plan? Or is this a plan that's going to be devised by the city planners and then presented to the commission to review and approve? I'm not sure.
It's both. The statutes lay out a framework that talks about the number of hearings. It's less than a handful. That talks about nights, weekends for at least one of those. Talks about the website interaction that we need to have. So the plan would come back to you with our recommendation that it satisfied the legal requirements for the process, but you would need to make sure it satisfied the substantive needs of the community for actual communication. So there's process and there's due process. You'll retain the authority to tell us what processes to do.
So while we retain that authority, are we going to be presented with a plan to review consistent with, the requirements that are set forth for public participation in this, in this public meeting forum?
Yes, and that's exactly why I want to get started on it now. Between my office and Ms. Leone's office, I know what the statute calls for. The outline's pretty simple, but filling it out with the actual manner in which people will participate in these meetings will take some thought. For example, there are times when the appearance of authority and power is good. There are times when the appearance of authority and power is not good in encouraging public participation. Those are issues that are above my pay grade, and I'm hoping that our specialist, Mr. Aguilar, can help us with. He's worked many, many years with the city doing just this kind of work. And I guess in a nutshell, I'm keenly aware that there's a difference between a public hearing and public listening. And I think we need to make the community feel comfortable that we're listening.
One of the things, the reason I asked about our monthly meetings is because if we were to have our meetings, we had these 4 weeks apart from the last meeting. We had it sort of, you know, the last Wednesday or the third or fourth Wednesday or something of every month. One of the meetings would probably be on or about August 25th, which is pretty close to September 1st. And so if we had a date like that for the plan to be presented, that would give us that whole meeting to talk about it with a little extra leeway. Would something like that work?
That's great with me. If Mr. Aguilar is online, I want to confirm his availability.
Thank you for that. I'm looking at my wall calendar right at the moment. I have no vacations. I'll be around. Happy to make that work.
Spoken like an essential worker for the last year.
What does that mean? Yeah. So how does the commission feel about that date for a plan to be presented to us?
The date is fine. I have no problems with that. I will be in upstate New York, so I'll just get online at 8 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the date again?
8/25.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I will be back by then. August 25 is fine.
Okay.
Judge White, you reminded me a bit of open meeting law trivia that is worthy of mention. We're operating these remote meetings under the largesse of executive orders suspending the Brown Act requirement that we all be within the same jurisdiction. Normally, the city council needs to all be in town. So that should work. We're all expecting that the Brown Act will be permanently changed by the success of online meetings. So just FYI.
That's interesting.
Interesting point.
Many of us are doing hearings from other states and things that we never thought we'd be doing. Okay.
Yeah, the 25th is good for me, but should we, in addition to setting a date for our review, also direct or require that appropriate staff submit to the commissioners in advance of such a meeting any proposed plan that is being proposed for our review in advance of the meeting?
Well, Mr. Colon had said something about a status in between, so maybe we could talk about when that would be, and then when an actual, we'd need a draft at least several days before the August 25th meeting to review, right, Judge Khan? That's what you're speaking of?
Right.
Okay. What about the interim status update that you talked about, Mr. Colon? How would you work that?
I think the last Wednesday in July would be fine if people are available. And Judge Khan, I think the answer is yes. If you feel comfortable being that specific, that would actually be useful in communicating to the city council.
Okay. Yeah, because go ahead.
Sorry. Well, the other specific is, as Judge Johnson alluded, we'll want to get this to you more than 72 hours before the meeting. So if you wanted a couple weeks ahead of time, let us know and we'll accommodate.
How much time do you
Well,
think, John?
What's the question?
How much time in advance of the meeting do you think you'd like to see it?
Well, I probably would only take a few, depending upon how long it is, maybe a few moments to review and then a few moments more to analyze. And then if we have to try and look at some statutes, and or maybe some cases to determine if public participation is clearly defined to apply those principles to the proposed plan. So how long do you think you would require?
You know, as I'm hearing you discuss it, Your Honor, I'm thinking that the July meeting might be good for us to present the framework that we've outlined, our work in progress, and really treat it as a work session so that what you get in August is as fully baked as possible. So that would move our deadline internally up a little bit, but I think 2 months from now is sufficient to get this kind of work done. Again, back to both Ms. Sosa Acosta and Mr. Aguilar, who will probably be doing the bulk of this.
Okay.
Yeah, when you said
So-
having it 2 weeks in advance, I doubt that we would need, that much time under any circumstances, but several days. That's why, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah,
Well-
I agree. Several days is fine. And I think if we do get the framework at a July 28 meeting, then we're that much better equipped to analyze the document once we have it. So I would think if we have the framework on July 28 and then say with our meeting August 25, maybe have it to us maybe 5 days before. I think that would be adequate.
And for my own peace of mind, by framework, I believe that this plan needs to have a calendar associated with it so we can begin planning. Is that correct?
I think that would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it will be for us, for sure.
Okay, great. Okay,
Okay.
that's all I have.
Do we need, we set meetings now tentatively in July and August. Do we need to set one to keep this process going in June, just so we have it on our
Yes, Your Honor.
calendar? If
Yes,
we
Your Honor.
are doing while we're sitting here, the last week would be the 30th or the 23rd. One of those days would be all right with me. How does the rest of the commission feel? And then we'll see how staff feels, because they have to do the work.
I will be gone, but Ms. Sosa Acosta will be here. I'm getting a once in 38 year 3-week vacation.
Oh my gosh. Thank up for that.
I just have one question. Why do you wait 38 years with all the pressure that I'm sure you have, dealing with a variety of legal issues the city has to deal with?
I had 4 kids and I had to live in Palo Alto. That's why.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. Yep. Judge White, do you have a preference?
I have a full day arbitration, which ends at 5 on the 30th. So my preference would be the 23rd, if that
Fine.
works for.
Judge Khan?
Yeah, I've got a full mediation that day that ends at 5. I had one today. What I did was ask the parties if we could start earlier so I could have a 4:30 absolute stop time. I mean, I could try and do that again.
I'm happy to do that in my arbitration. So if the 30th works better, we can do that as well. Either way.
The
So,
30th is a little better for me than the 23rd, but
Let's do the 30th and I'll just get started early that day.
okay. Judge Khan, does that work for you?
yeah, June 30th.
How about Mr. Colon and those who had to provide all the materials? The 30th of June?
Yes, and what you would expect as an agenda report would just be an update on any council action in furtherance of your recommendation.
I think that meeting, since we don't have a specific agenda, is just to have it on a monthly basis, so everyone knows. And if we have questions, we can raise them on any topic at that time.
And also getting a status on the writ of mandate and the preparation of the writ.
Okay, let me add that. Okay, thank you. Okay. If that concludes your discussion of future agendas,
Okay.
any additional comments?
Can I, Judge Johnson, one comment, Mr. Collin? On behalf of the District Elections Committee, I want to express my gratitude to Judge Johnson, Judge Khan, and Judge White. We were dealing with this a few years ago in the conceptual stages and thought it would be a good idea to have some quality local jurists, not from the county, but from adjoining counties, come in and manage this redistricting process as we went through the census in the years to come. And it's really gratifying to see it come to fruition with a good group of quality folks like yourselves at the helm. Very much appreciate your efforts on behalf of the communities in Santa Barbara.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored
Thank
to
you.
have been asked, so thanks.
Absolutely.
I just had one further comment too, if I may. And again, thank you for your time, and to echo Judge Ochoa's comments, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I did just want to make one final comment on the, for the record, as it were, on the importance of being as expeditious as possible. This was a, very unusual circumstance, and so you have to deal with it, and we understand that. And yet at the same time, it was the case that people thought that the new lines would be in place for this November's race. So I think that trying to have some of the discussion this fall and during that time period is a really good idea, because there will be more interest in the issue at that point than at any other time. So, as I said, I think that is an important factor, and that I don't know if that's an official motion from this body, or then it kind of goes back to the city. But I do think it should be recorded that there is input from the District Elections Commission that, in light of the fact that it can't be this November, that therefore an expeditious process and one during this election, during September and October, would be appropriate and desirable and get the most input. There's one other factor, though, that should be considered. And as Mr. Colon knows, one of the other issues in the charter amendments was that that called for elections if there are openings on the city council. And that is a situation that could emerge at any point in time. Given the 3-year term, someone could be elected to a higher office. In terms of, we've had openings in the past, and therefore, for all of those reasons, you want to have an expeditious new lines in place rather than having lines that are built on the 2010 census, further into the 2020s. So in any event, as I said, I just would like to make that one further comment.
Indeed.
It's always good to have historical memory on these things. It really is.
We'll reflect that communication in the minutes, and I I understand the issue around vacancy. It's a risk we hope we don't have to deal with. But I'm understanding the committee to support doing this fall or beginning this fall because of the political interest that will be there during that time period, and report it that way.
I think so. That match your feelings, Judge Khan and Judge Allen?
Absolutely,
Right,
yes.
that's why I keep doing that, Judge
That's
Khan.
quite all right.
I don't really know your name in it, but it pops up strangely on your
That's right. It's taking me back 36 years to my maiden.
name. No, we'd like to get out and meet people and have them see us and talk to us sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Can I inquire if you've had a chance to look at the minutes while we've been doing this?
I did, and I approve the minutes.
Judge Khan?
I did, and I concur. I approve.
I as well.
Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Colon, anything else we need to do?
No, Your Honor, we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Anyone opposed?
yes.
I take that to mean you really want to adjourn. Okay. Thank you very much. And we have our next 3 meetings all set. So I feel like we're on the roll here. This is excellent.
Okay, so just to
Thank you
be
very much.
certain, next meeting's June 30th again at 5 p.m.
Yes.
to be followed by an interim status meeting in connection with the civic engagement plan on July 28th, also at 5 p.m.
Yes.
And then finally, I guess the full review and or approval of such a civic engagement plan set for meeting August 25th, again at 5 p.m.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay,
Confirmed.
all right. So
Thanks, everyone. Interesting as
Thank you.
always.
nice,
Thank you, Dr. Evanstein.
nice to see you all. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for the kind comments, Judge Ochoa and Dr. Evanstein. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate
Bye. Enjoy Memorial Day.
it. Indeed.
Okay,
Okay.
you too.
Leave the webinar. Yes. Okay.